Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com. A quick reminder, you can now listen early and ad-free with our new subscriber offer. Just click on the link in this show's bio to start your free trial today. You've joined us for an episode this week on the art of performing ritual as we welcome back one of our favorite returning guests, Brother Jason Short. Welcome back, Brother Jason.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, we've had you talk about a lot of the esoteric aspects of the craft. You've shared your research into some of our degree work and ritual. And with tonight's episode, I really feel like we're going to get into the grist of it, which is the performance of ritual, which that's really the whole experience there. Before we get into talking about that, I want to reflect a little bit on your background. Can you comment on what you do professionally and how that applies to your work in the craft?
Sure. Well, I'm an independent producer and craftsman with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees and Studio Mechanics Union, Local 52. I've been involved with the theatrical arts and entertainment since 1995, landing my first professional role in 1997, and then spent the entirety of my youth employed and involved in regional and community theaters in Northern Colorado. I got a scholarship to move to New York in 2008 to attend the New York Conservatory for Dramatic Arts School of Film, Television, and Theater, and did their 2-year conservatory program. After graduated, I started to focus a little bit more on film and television production, and more behind the scenes than in front of the camera. And eventually took the course through the Hollywood Film Institute to study producing and directing, and found myself also enjoying building scenery. And so for financial and emotional stability, joined the Local 52 as a craftsman.
I didn't know all of that about you. I knew that you, when we had first met, you had mentioned that, oh yeah, I'm a craftsman, and I'm like a real craftsman, like a Craftsman Online craftsman, no, I work in the theater district and I, help build sets. Is I think how you described it. I had no idea you had this whole other education and background and experience. That's so awesome.
It's been a trip. I remember it was really funny at one point in my life thinking, wow, I've spent like half of my life in performance. How cool. And now I look back and it's been 27 years, almost 28 years.
I feel like we have the perfect guest because you're, in my opinion, like an expert on performance and production. And that's what we're going to get into on this episode, is talking about the performance of ritual. And I just want to say this right off the bat. I mean, we say in the disclaimer, it's our own viewpoints, our own opinions, but the purpose of this episode is not to scold brethren, but rather to provide some tips on how to enhance the degree experience for everybody that's involved, not just the candidate, but sometimes the other brothers that are around. Before we get into the actual ritual part, I'm just curious because I also had a theater and performance background as a kid, performing in my local community theater. When you first witnessed ritual, and this would be, in your first degree, after a certain point of the degree, you are aware, you can see everything that's happening in the room. When did you kind of make a connection that, okay, this is they're not speaking from the heart per se, they're repeating lines that come from a script somewhere?
You know, I was really fortunate for my first degree to have coincided with the end of the pandemic. And so the brothers who were presenting it had done a really great job of preparing. It was really well memorized and then presented like through and through. And so understanding that what was going on had to be ritual, we knew that going in, that this was a presentation of such, but it was so seamlessly done, where after the fact, it left me with a sense of inspiration to continue to do that. Like I wanted to participate in doing that. Um, and it's funny, and you kind of touched on this before, how um, some degree work happens and it's not that great, and those experiences, you can tell when people are stumbling over lines and other people are feeding them lines, that you're in the middle of this kind of performance, and it breaks the fourth wall. um, is kind of like a performance terminology, in that you're you're all of a sudden making the audience aware of the gag, and um so for me, for my first experience with it to have been so polished and pristine, um was a blessing. I can only imagine what brothers feel like after witnessing a degree for the first time that is just stumbling all over the place.
I don't know, because while you're talking about that, I was also part of a lodge that we had a first degree that we conferred, and people would refer to them as the COVID degrees, which means absolutely nothing. The ritual, as you had said, if anything, was better because we have an exemplar going through the role of the candidate, so that takes a lot of stress off of certain parts of the performance of the ritual, to where there's just unknown factor because we don't know what this other person who hasn't rehearsed or isn't aware of the script is going to do or say at certain parts. So we have more of a fixed outcome. But in my experience, I was a Mason before COVID, and I just remember being super nervous myself with everything that goes to preparing for that first degree. There's that excitement that's inside of you that, hey, this thing that I really wanted to do, that I visited this lodge, I kind of hung out with some of these guys, like now they know my name, they are excited for me to do this thing, and now I'm putting on this weird outfit, and then I'm sitting in this room with other people, and it's dark, and they're telling me what to do, and I have no idea, and then this door opens up, and then all these things start happening to me, and I can't see anything because I have so at that point I wasn't really paying attention to any of the ritual. And because we're both New York Masons, we also come from the New York ritual, which is steeped in old English. So I'm sitting here saying, did he just say whence came you? Like what are they talking about?
Yeah.
So it really didn't dawn on me until much later in the degree, and those who have gone through are going to know the point that I'm talking about when I say the presentation of the working tools. That's when the brother that was doing that was stumbling, and it was the first time that there was a pause, and then I didn't know who the brother was, but those are in the know. It was the secretary that would prompt the next line, and then he kind of picked up, went a few more words, had this like, you could tell he was having a mental block,
Mhm.
and the secretary was prompting, and the poor guy was sweating and nervous and just kind of rushed through it and finished. And then after the degree, as we were getting redressed in our suit and tie, he came into the preparation room and said, look, I'm really sorry, I got nervous. Can I just do my part so that you can hear this, because this is very important? And I was actually kind of moved by that. On the flip side, I have seen guys that have performed ritual in front of me, and I'll say his name, Matthew Brockbank, from my mother lodge, St. John's number 6 in Schenectady. He's amazing. He can do the historical lecture all by himself flawlessly, and he walks around the lodge, and it's the definition of playing with a snowball. I had no idea that he was doing something from memory until he started getting to certain parts in the historical lecture that have the old English, and I realized, oh my gosh, this guy didn't write these words, he's repeating them, but he knows them so well that it feels like he's communicating them to me. And that to me was just super, yeah, super magical. I'll never forget that.
The first impression that we really get coming in the room is engaging with a ritual, that first performance that's given to us. And it has such a profound impact. And Since my first degree, I've been able to participate in degrees. Our lodge actually, that initial class of entered apprentices, they were like, "Welcome to the craft. By the way, here's a script. Next month, you guys are going to confer the first degree for the guys behind you," which is a really powerful kind of trial by fire hose experience. But put a lot of pressure on brothers, because again, in my mind, uh, performance has a very um, important place. Um, and understanding, if you mess that up, like, the show must go on. You got to get through it. But this has the power to really impact the trajectory of a brother's life going forward. You really have this one chance to really inculcate the way that can be the profound nature of these degrees to somebody. And let's be honest, is that's not always going to happen. Um, I think it's really beautiful when we do see brothers. We're really fortunate to have so many brothers in the craft who are so passionate about it that they make the work their own. And you can hear like a middle chamber lecture, a historical lecture, or even a charge, or the whys and wherefores. Even there's some brothers out there that they take these sections of the ritual that are kind of difficult to present, especially in New York with the Old English, and do so in a way that humanizes it.
Yeah, it really becomes, and right, spot on, as they really become performing. And if you're just a sideliner watching that night, you're not going through it yourself. You start to recall your experience, and now you can really hear the words. Like you're not just listening to them; you're hearing the words. You're understanding that message that's underneath it, because that brother has done such an awesome job of performing it. When it got to your night for degrees, how much did you know about that was coming? Because I was the guy that when they said, "Don't read this chapter in the Dummy's Guide to Freemasonry or Freemasonry for Idiots," I'm like, "What chapter? You said 6? Was it 7? Let me get right to that. I'm flipping right. I want to know what's happening."
I had to make a conscious effort not to ruin the surprise for myself. I wanted some sort of profound effect. Of course, I dabbled into YouTube, and of course, we dabbled into what was available on Amazon or Netflix at the time. And during the pandemic, the some of the mentors from our lodge had even had this Sunday roundtable series going, and they would send out like a little snippet, like a little appetizer of Masonic education, that really made me want to dig deeper. But I'm glad I didn't, because going through the door, I had no idea what to expect. And without giving too much away, again, those who know will know, how we are received. You walk into the lodge room, and then how you are received was a moment that I was like, "Oh, this is real. This is going to be real."
Hey, it's Brother Michael RC, co-founder of Craftsman Online and host of the podcast that you're listening to now. We are so excited from the announcement of our new subscription service for our podcast, and just overwhelmed by the support of great listeners like you. Here's what you get for just $5 a month: an ad-free listening experience. You get to hear all of the podcasts with no annoying commercials before, in, or afterwards. Plus, you get to be the first to hear new episodes. You get them at least a week before everybody else. And we've also included exclusive access to subscriber-only content, like extended conversations with some of our favorite guests on the topic of the podcast. For example, we've had Brother John Nagy, who extensively gets into some of the deeper meanings and lessons on subjects that he's shared on our podcast. Plus, coming soon, we'll have our first exclusive Zoom webinar with a special guest that's just for our subscribers, where you get to interact on Zoom with our guest and me and get your questions asked and answered. All of this for just $5 a month. The link, we're including it in this episode. You can also find it on our website at craftsmanonline.com. $5 a month. Take your Craftsman Online podcast listening experience to the next level. I know that each lodge has its own way of how they prepare for a degree. I've seen some really scary ones where it's like, hey guys, we have a new brother that's going to be coming in. We got to get ready for the EA degree. It's going to be next month. It's going to be here. And who wants to do what? Or other lodges where they'll assign a officer to kind of be the director or the herdsman, for lack of a better term, to bring everybody together, assign the parts, get everything set up, really kind of direct and produce the degree for that evening. How does your lodge do it, or what's a successful way that you've seen it done?
Our lodge has a ritual director who works like the AGL in making sure people are rehearsed, they know their part, etc. They also typically oversee the assignment of roles. However, my lodge also has had a history back before the pandemic, and I think, and just a side note, I think across the nation, lodge attendance is still pretty down. So traditionally, having the officers of the lodge perform the roles that they are assigned when they are installed is the way to do it. And then what we would do in our lodge is our junior warden then confers the first degree, and the worshipful master sits in the junior warden spot, or you have a past master sit in the junior warden spot. The senior warden doing the second degree, and then of course the worshipful master conferring the third degree. They break up some of the worshipful master's work, which I've seen in New York is one of the common things we do. We'll have a different brother do the working tools. We have a brother do the apron presentation. Personally, I would love to be able to be in the East and do all of those parts, because when we get to the whys and wherefores and the questions and answers, there are parts that indicate that the worshipful master has conferred certain things upon us. And I guess there's a bit of a traditionalist in me that would love to see that happen. However, that's the way that my lodge does it. I think that to really successfully do it, it's a matter of understanding what's going to work for your lodge, based on your membership, who's actually attending, and then B, having a culture when you get to assigning officer positions and when you get to assigning the chairs, that every brother stepping into a leadership role understands that they will be conferring that work. One of the cool things that was pointed out to me that our lodge used to do was the junior deacon would confer the historical lecture in the first degree. Senior deacon obviously does the middle chamber lecture. And the Tyler would be the senior deacon on deck. And while they're outside of the lodge, would be studying the middle chamber lecture for the following year.
It's interesting to hear how each lodge has their own way of organizing a degree. And I think one of the key components you talked about is the ritual director. I think that is super important, because this person really works as a aid for the worshipful master when it comes to, okay, the lodge has just balloted, we've accepted this brother, now we got to go through the degrees. We're not going to have this freak out, because if we have a great worshipful master who's put together a trestle board, he's already planned for this and can be a little flexible to move things around. But the ritual director takes a lot of the work off of the master's plate and saying, all right, the pillar officers are going to do their parts, just as, Jason, you were saying, and then everyone that's elected to a chair, they should be doing their role for that evening. If they're not able to, then we need to find fill-ins. And where do we have holes and gaps? Okay, and then here's the next key thing. How are we going to set up a practice schedule? Where are we going to have rehearsals? Who needs to be there? And I'll never forget this because initially it used to drive me crazy. But my mother lodge in Schenectady, we would have our degree rehearsals on Sunday nights. I want to say like around 6 or 7, which was painful for me because I think I was the only guy that watched football that was like, oh man, I'm gonna miss the end of the late game. And I remember like almost getting into a heated argument with the ritual director at the time because I was a senior steward, so I had zero speaking part. I really needed to be there for the floor work, which the candidate doesn't see, by the way. I'm the only. So I'm like, and I remember saying to him, this is a volunteer organization. Why do I need to be coming to this? I could be spending. But I saw the value in it years later when I did have a speaking part, when I was the senior deacon, and I knew the floor work of how to lead a candidate around the lodge. I could have done it if I was blindfolded instead of the candidate that was during the degree. So I think that those are kind of the key components there. We've had to get creative with my lodge here in DC because we only meet once a month. So, and we don't own the building that we meet in. That's the other caveat there. So I've actually had outside degree work in my backyard. I set up an outdoor symbolic lawn chair degree, and we sit in those chairs and do our parts. And my yard's big enough that neighbors, nobody can hear anything. And my wife just will occasionally like look outside to see what we're doing, and that's it. But I think the getting together and doing it in person, that's important not just for the brotherhood of the craft, but also for the fellowship in between the members on the team, because you know where you're, just like a team, or if we were throwing a ball to each other, you know where this guy's going to maybe have some tough parts, and there's ways you can slow down your delivery to give him time so that he can be ready for his next line.
It is kind of like, this is our sporting event. You know, you wouldn't just go out and play a game of ball and never have practiced or never scrimmaged. You'd do terrible all the time. You would never win. And ritual is our opportunity as a lodge, not just to make a lasting impression on the candidate or the brother, but to also show off as a lodge. You know, this is the presentation that we do most outwardly for brothers to come and attend. You know, so having the respect for the floor work, having respect for the presentation, that level of prestige, like that's your lodge's signature, you know. And I think part of some of the issue, and a lot of it comes down to, I think, attendance. Like when you have more people who are showing up to a lodge, you'll get the guys who really want to do ritual work, and whether they're the seated officer or whether they're a dedicated degree team, which I know some lodges and districts have, you get people who really understand that prestige. Garibaldi Lodge in New York is a great example. Here's a lodge that has dispensation to confer their degree in Italian, and also in, I believe it's the only Scottish Rite degree that's conferred in New York for the Blue Lodge system. Man, people come from all over the world to see them perform their ritual. And having that culture, or having that drive to, when you get your officers together and when you go for this rehearsal where everybody's on board, that this is like, we're about to play ball here. Like we're about to go in and you know, we could lose, but let's win.
that's a that's a great saying, actually.
Like somehow just try to inspire the teamwork element. That's one thing that I bring to all of the projects that I produce. That's one of the things that I really loved about theater, is the ensemble atmosphere. You're in, this is a team sport.
I want to talk to a point you made. It's a big phrase in the corporate world: right people, right roles, or best people in the best roles for the best outcome. But I think for lodges, And you had mentioned, I'd like to be the master that can confer all of the parts of the master. And I think really only those who have gone through the experience and now not only know that, but also themselves have studied the ritual, know what the real parts of the master are. Presenting the apron, the working tools. Sometimes we quote unquote farm those out to other brothers, or we have other brothers. If you have a great lodge, like you said, they want to be a part of the degree. You're like, oh, cool, you can handle this. You do the charge. You do a fantastic job with that. I've seen a brother who gives the charge that it sounds like your dad is giving you a lecture, and no, you can hear people breathe while he is doing his part. Like, he is very stern and very focused, and you really feel like you're being charged yourself. It's not just something that's being read to you. I like to see all stars that can come in and kind of help with that. I was curious your thoughts, if you have a brother, because I've come across a few that ritual is really not their thing. They struggled with the catechism, memorizing their part. Maybe they're not a great public speaker. They just get nervous. They don't feel whatever the situation may be. How do you feel about them, especially if they're sitting in a chair or they have an important position in the lodge, taking a sideline role for that evening?
I think it's really important for a lodge to have an understanding and a respect for what it is that they do. And part of that is, I think, being realistic. Not every brother is cut out for doing ritual work, and that's okay. That's why we open and close the lodge. That's why we conduct business and give brothers who want to be an officer position the opportunity to participate. With that being said, if you have a brother that has could be a past master, it could be a newly initiated brother who gets into the craft and is really, really on point, and that that's going to make an impression on a hoodwinked brother coming through the door. Embrace that. Part of being part of a team is understanding our individual limitations, but understanding also what we're capable of doing together. And if that means you got to maybe have a designated degree team who's going to make a really, really profound impact on people, and they take pride in doing that, then lean into it. Where you lose brothers is when you force the ritual down their throat, when you force them into a position where they're not prepared or they're not really wanting to engage, or put themselves out there, because that's embarrassing for them. And ultimately, that'll be embarrassing for the lodge, especially if you're trying to make an impression on brothers coming through the door. Um, at the end of the day, our exoteric and our esoteric balance, and kind of our internal and external balance, comes down to our presentation and what our culture is.
Yeah, I can tell you come from a good lodge, and you can pick that up from brothers when they talk about the degree being an experience, not just for the candidate, but to kind of lift everybody in the room. And here's how you know, and one of my, how do you know if you had a great degree night? Is that after the degree, there's an instant conversation that starts somewhere over something that happened. There's questions that are being asked. A not so great degree is we go downstairs, we have our cake and coffee, we break for the evening, everybody has their cars, and we meet up again at the next meeting. One of my favorite degrees was a third degree we did recently here, where we got into a conversation immediately with the brothers that we had just raised that evening about the role of the ruffians and why they accosted Hiram Abiff and what the significance of that was, and all these questions that they were asking. And I was down there with them upstairs with them for probably a good hour afterwards, and just really engaged and connected in this conversation, and started seeing other seasoned or veteran brothers, coming in and leaning in and offering their input. And really, this is what Freemasonry is about. Like, the performance of good ritual, when we go to a good play or dinner theater or any kind of performing art, you're like, wow, that's talent, that's beautiful. But it's the how it inspires you, and that's the art of it that takes it to the next level. That, to me, that's the high five that happens when I know I've been a part of a good degree team.
It's that lasting effect that I think we really are all in search of, because we want to be inspired. People watch a movie because you want to feel an effect. You go to see a play because you want to be affected. That's kind of the beauty of it. And the tradition of storytelling is to affect the audience.
Mm.
Yeah, illustrious brother Stenrick Adams was saying, uh, brought up this quote by Maya Angelou recently, and it's that I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And walking away from the first degree ritual, you're either going to have be very excited and have a million questions and want to know more, or the third degree especially, like, does this have, what's the philosophical significance, what's the allegorical, is this some cosmic drama, what's going on? You want that effect, but they don't necessarily know exactly the words or exactly who did what, especially if they're hoodwinked, until they themselves have a cathartic moment and re-examine the degree work. I was talking to a brother the other night. We had seen one of the Scottish Rite degrees, and coming back from it, it was just like I don't know if I'm the only person who does this, but after seeing a degree, trying to imagine like what this would have been like
Mm.
in the 19th century in a really, really populated lodge. Like, what was that tone? Back when memorization, like, it was a prerequisite for being able to get up there. Back when, like, the threat of the obligation actually seemed like, man, I could walk out of here and that could happen to me tonight. There's like just a certain profound appreciation for the presentation of the degrees, for the presentation of that moment, that I think comes with, again, having the respect for the culture of your lodge, giving yourself the permission to have fun with the degree, and while throughout understanding that you're there to inculcate this knowledge on an audience.
If you do great degree work, you're going to make amazing Masons, and that
Yeah,
cycle is going to continue, right?
yeah, yeah. That's the gold.
Again, one of my favorite guests to have on. We're going to bring him back as soon as we can. Brother Jason Short, thank you so much for being a part of us again.
Thank you, Brother RC.
A reminder, you can listen to future episodes early and ad-free with our subscriber offer. Get the link to start your 7-day free trial in the show notes for this episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more, you can just tell Siri or Alexa to play the Craftsman Online podcast. We're available on all streaming platforms with new episodes every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.